This is our party room, and it was supposed to have some fancy artwork on it before we opened, but we just ran out of time. But now I'm about to correct that. I am fond of the Tetris-style artwork that I did in the restrooms, and I thought I'd give a shot at making something similar, and I decided on Space Invaders.
Invaders! Possibly from space!
I wanted to cut these out of wood and paint them, but one problem I had was figuring out how to deal with these stray pixels. So for example, these pixels here don't really attach to anything if you were to attempt to cut this from wood. So another idea I had was like this, where I leave the wood in the center and paint it black. So with this design, I would essentially cut the entire piece out like this, and then just paint this area. A third option I considered was just modernizing the aliens a bit like this, so that it eliminated the pixel problem. But what I ended up settling on was this design. Basically, I enlarged and rounded all of the pixels so that they overlap slightly, thus making the legs attached properly. Next, I designed all of the pieces I would need by hand, and then just sent the artwork over to my friend Jean, who has a small laser cutter. When the pieces are done, they can simply be popped out like so. The next order of business is to get some primer on these things. I can't fit them all on the table at once, but I got about 2/3 of them here. I like to use this Kills primer on MDF as it seems to work pretty good. And there we go. That's the first coat applied. 24 hours later, they are ready for a light sanding on top. This is to help the texture of these things be very smooth, almost like plastic when I paint them. After sanding is done, I hit them with a second thin coat of primer, let that sit for about half an hour before painting. So the question is, what color to paint these things? If you look at the original Space Invaders, which we have one in the arcade, the aliens are all white and the bases are green. But then if you look at the Atari 2600 port, all of the aliens are brown and the bases are orange. Plus there are only 3 bases instead of the usual 4. Later Atari versions had colored aliens, although the shapes are totally different than before. And then there's this deluxe version where the shapes and bases are right, but the colors are all weird. So I ended up going with this version here, really for no other reason than I liked it. So that's what my wall is going to be based on. So we'll start by painting the bases, and then move on to the aliens. After the paint dried, I decided to paint the edges black. And this is something I sort of regret because it turned out to be much more time consuming than I thought, taking me almost 2 days to do. I had tried some other methods using spray paint, but none of those tests turned out very well, so I ended up just doing each piece by hand using a model paintbrush. Once the paint dried, I handed this project over to Kai, one of our employees. They started by laying it out all on the floor in order to make sure the measurements and spacing of everything was correct. After all, there would only be one chance to stick these to the wall because they aren't coming back off. Kai used a laser level to mark out the positions of everything on the wall with masking tape. Also, this lower section here is right above the height of the chairs, as I didn't want the chairs bumping into the pieces. Now it was just a matter of time to put all the pieces on the wall. This actually took about 3 hours to do, but it's starting to really come together. And the last thing to do is peel off all the masking tape. And here it is. I think it looks beautiful, and this only fills the left side of the wall. I'm planning a similar design on the other side, and I'm thinking about Cubert at the moment, but I'm curious to know what your suggestion is. So leave me a comment as to which video game you'd like to see on the other side.